Welcome to the Painting Insights podcast. We have been working on something in the background.
That's right. We've actually started a Patreon channel. For the last couple of months, we've had previous guests revisit the channel to give us additional content, everything from studio tours, sketchbook tours, talking us through the process of paintings and all kinds of additional treats, which you're exclusively going to see as a patron who supports the channel.
So by supporting us on Patreon, you help the channel keep going. There's a lot of work put into this, from the video editing to the sourcing of guests. So you really help us find those guests and to put the content out.
And we have lots of content planned for the near future. So the links for that will be in the description of this video and in the description on the podcast channels. And otherwise, you can go on to Patreon and type in Painting Insights Podcast and support us that way. Thanks very much. Enjoy the video. Would you mind introducing yourself for the audience, please?
Sure. I'm Michael Weller. I'm a still life painter. So I work in the studio. I work from a range of just a few objects: a cup, a bowl, a few apples, a red bowl, a blue cup, very simple shapes. And I'm influenced by more abstract artists like Rothko. Simple general shapes, you could call them colour shapes. And I live in Dorset, near the sea and harbour.
Lovely, great. I'm always drawn to your work, Michael. It's something very simplistic about it, but very deep and meaningful as well. It's interesting. I was sort of refreshing myself through your work, and I'm reminded of Giorgio Morandi a lot, and you saying about your, working from similar objects or the same objects over and over, and in different compositions and with different colours. Is Morandi an influence at all on your still life painting?
I do love Morandi, so that's nice that you say that. Yeah, I saw the exhibition at the Asterisk collection in North London, and thought it was very beautiful and calm, and it made me think, I really like Morandi's colours. I want my works to be a bit more like Morandi's. Maybe I could use some of those earth colours, so I did. And then I thought, I don't think I want to use earth colours. I quite like the some sort of louder colours sometimes, pink or mint green. So I do really like him though, and I have been thinking a bit more about the earth colours recently.
Yeah, that's interesting, because Morandi, he does, it's very much within that sort of muted or tonal range, but every now and then he puts in a sort of a pop of kind of pink or yellow, and even though it's still muted, it's bouncing against those greys and those earthy colours, it always seems to stand out. And I can see that also in your work when you have a kind of a strong cadmium there and some greys next to it.
So thanks. So I use just three colours. Lemon yellow. I use Jackson's artist oils, if I'm allowed to say that. Sometimes lemon yellows go very green in other brands, and it's a bit horrifying. And when you find that you've bought a big tube of the wrong colour. And I like madder rose and cobalt blue and a warm white, like a zinc white.
So no cadmiums in there at all?
Well, I did used to use more colours, but I think something in me is quite lazy and likes to just use as few colours as possible. It helps me to think about it in terms of how light is it, how dark is it, how red or yellow or blue is it compared to the next. That's the interesting bit for me, you know, big shapes to small shapes, how high up or low down they are, and you know, how light or dark. I don't think about things in terms of temperature. That doesn't work for me for some reason.
Yeah, that's interesting as well about the limited palette. I tend to work in a limited palette too, or primary colours, but I'll often shift them around. So when I first started painting, I bought every colour under the sun, and ended up with lots of different tubes of yellows and reds and blues, and didn't learn anything about mixing colours from all of those tubes. But I come across an old blog online about colour triads and working with just 3 primaries plus whites, and it totally revolutionised how I work. So now I work with 3 primaries, sometimes an earth colour in there as well. But because I had so many tubes of these yellows and blues and reds, I often switch them around. So sometimes it may be a cadmium red, other times it could be a primary red or a alizarin crimson or something. And then equally with the yellows, sometimes it's a yellow ochre or cadmium. So it works within just 3 colours. And I found you really get to know colour much more by working with that limited palette. And it's interesting you say as well that you're working with the same kind of subjects, in intimacy with those subjects. And I guess it's the same with the colour as well. You get to know the colour as well as you get to know your subject.
I find it just helps me to really limit my choices. A lot of it's about getting the colour shapes to work within the 4 sides of the canvas, and scratching it off and rubbing it out and then restating the lines until I feel like it's almost there and it's time to stop, it starts to almost resemble what I'm painting, or there's a nice tension between the shapes and the 4 sides of the canvas. It's not always the colours that I see. Sometimes there's a bit of slippage or a mistake, but then I look at it later and think, that works okay. Maybe it's the shapes that are more important. So the lines go down first. I did agonise about whether or not to put the colours down first. Lots of painters that I know work from colour patches or colour swatches. And I have worked like that sometimes, but I like the lines. I like the lines to be strongly present as well.
So drawing or getting the composition drawing worked out first, that's really important. Yeah, it's
like I think something like Bernard said, a well-designed painting is half done, something like that. So it's like you can stop at any point, and if you like things to be a bit unfinished, like I do, that's I like things to look a bit slightly unresolved, or like they could be the painting could be gone back into.
Yeah. It's that point where it is. It could still be a work in progress in that sense, but you sort of just kind of decided that point just to step away from it.
So, like this other painter said, Bernard Dunstan. He said something like, "When it starts to resemble what you're looking at, then it's nearly finished."
Right. Absolutely. So how long on average are you sort of spending on a painting?
So I work on several at once. I used to work on just one at a time. I didn't find that worked very well for me because I was chasing the light and it would change throughout the day. So after a lot of thinking about it, I have now switched to working on several at once. And so even the small pictures that look like they've been done in a rush, you know, they might take a few days amidst all the other paintings. When I get to a part of the painting and think I don't know what to do, I'll often switch to another painting so that my interest is, you know, I'm involved in the painting and not fed up with it and painting in a dutiful kind of way.
Absolutely. And you can sometimes step away from it, go back and see it with new eyes again.
Turning it upside down sometimes, that seems to work. Yeah.
Great. Do you have a question, Simon?
Yeah, well, you mentioned that about chasing the light, and it's interesting because a lot of still life painters who we've talked to have a real need to kind of control the lights by creating an artificial environment with lamp lights. Have you tried that and preferred natural light, or what was the reason why you prefer natural light? Is there a background there?
It is really important to me to have natural light. So, you know, one of the first painting teachers that I had was at Morley College. He did a portrait painting course. And he said, you know, always use natural light whenever you can. You know, it's more beautiful, it's more subtle, it's, you know, it's more surprising. So that's what I do. Natural light wherever possible. Apart from when I'm teaching, then I have to use artificial light. You know, otherwise it would drive the students mad. Sometimes when I'm doing a demonstration in the evening over Zoom, it sounds terrible, but I often have to walk across the room to see what is the colour that I'm painting, and my palette knife up to it. So I'm not exactly a natural when it comes to colour and light and dark. I do have to put a few things into practice, you know, like going up to something with my palette knife to find out what is that colour that I think I see. So I work quite slowly, really, even though the results look quite immediate.
That's really interesting. I teach on Zoom as well, and I was teaching last night, and because I think you teach for Winslow Art Centre, so it's mostly American students, so it's evening teaching. So I'm similar with the light situation. I totally understand. How do you find, and I'm sort of thinking about this question because I'm doing demonstrations, and how do you find teaching online? Do you teach in person? How do you find it as a sort of a practice thing compared to how you would normally be painting on your own? So doing a demonstration via Zoom and checking your colours, checking the light is a lot different to when you're painting on your own. So I was saying, I don't know, on Tuesday night and Wednesday night, I was saying, I rarely paint in this kind of linear fashion. So I start it and I say, no, I do this, and you know, over an hour or so. I'm usually getting up and walking around, looking out the window, going for a little break, making a cup of tea, having this break and coming back and seeing it with new eyes. Is it similar for you when you teach online?
So when I'm painting in the studio, I faff around quite a bit, and the painting might go really pear-shaped. Not because I'm particularly experimental, but I want it to be good, not just technically okay, sort of interesting to me. But when I'm teaching, it's more of a demonstration of, this is how I paint. This is what I think, will help you. This is something to bear in mind. And also, I guess if I'm really honest, I would quite like the painting to work in one go. Them to say, wow, Michael, that's amazing what you do. So the pressure is on a bit. And sometimes there is enjoyment to be had in painting in one go. I know painters that do this. They start, they finish, and it's good. But mine is usually more, I do a bit today. I draw a few lines. I put down some shadows in some other painting. Maybe I'll work something a bit more involved in the afternoon, just when it's time, before it's time to have my tea. And then I'll go back in the studio the following day and think, I don't know what to do. Should I just do a few lines? And by putting down those marks, I guess I become more involved in the painting, become more, in the realm of painting, and sort of interested in it and excited about what I'm doing. And I feel like I can, I want to do some other, work that I've started before. But when
that's your sort of way into it, is going back and making those marks and lines.
Yeah, like it's difficult to go back into a painting that you've left. So starting a new painting, working on several helps with that. Sometimes the painting can be left on the shelf for a few more days, and then maybe after a while I'll actually want to go back to it. In the class, though, it can be nice to sort of work on something in one go, but it's more kind of risky, and I suppose it's more about me trying to teach and showing students that you can change things, and you can, I don't know, make mistakes and correct them, and it's fine. Don't be afraid of the blank canvas. Make some mistakes, make lots of starts.
And that's such an important and valuable lesson as well. And just from my own experience, the past week, as I was teaching, I was doing the demonstrations, but they just seemed contrived in a sense. It was, I think, because I was overthinking it. And then I had a short break and just said, look, I'm going to come back in and sort of destroy the painting. And what I meant by that is I can't explain what I'm going to do next, but I'm going to get rid of this kind of tightness, contrived stuff. And just went in and started, and was able to sort of pull it around much more to my style, rather than something that was step by step. And I was really given that idea that painting often is something that you don't do step by step. You need to go in with a little bit of a sort of a chaotic energy sometimes, and take risks and make these marks, do these things. And often it's about how you then navigate the way either out of something or into something.
Sometimes I think I almost forget to enjoy the painting. It's a nice thing that, it's a nice thing to paint. I suppose if I work on several at once, then I'm probably enjoying it more. I can take a step back.
Yeah, that's interesting. I always think about Turner, where he would have all of these canvases sort of lined up, all around his studio, and he would take the Naples yellow and put Naples yellow on one, move to the next, and Naples yellow, move all the way around, and then come around with whatever the next colour was. It seems a little bit methodical to me. I like that your way of saying it, where you sort of you've got these things around you, but you pick up another painting and start it, and that starts the process again.
So I don't always feel like making work. It's only when I put a few marks down that I start to get into it. Mine. Yeah, there are moments of like sort of, you know, being in the painting. Other times when I'm, you know, faffing around, wasting time. But I think that's probably necessary. You know, I don't want to be like product next kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that faffing around is important, and that's, you know, I put that within sort of painting time or studio time. It's important that you're there around the paintings so you can work on them, but it isn't to turn up, sort of clock on, start painting, paint, have a tea break, you know, and have it regimented. I think you need that breathing space to sort of float around the studio a bit, become distracted, but you're there, you're near the work, and that's the important thing.
So sometimes I look at it in the evening and think, you know, that seems to work quite nicely. Even upside down, yeah, be a bit reflective. It's very, sometimes you're just completely in the paintings, aren't you? So it's hard to evaluate what you're doing until, you know, weeks or months later.
Absolutely. You said at the beginning that Rothko was an influence. Did I hear that right? Yeah.
Do you not believe?
No, I believe you. I believe you totally, and I like it very much. How, you know, these influences. I mean, I paint landscapes a lot, but, you know, a lot of my influences are from really other fields. So, what is it about Rothko? How does it relate to your work?
So I think you like Rothko too, don't you?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
I like Turner too.
Yeah.
I suppose it's different being, you know, it's different seeing them on the screen or in a book and seeing them in the flesh. So yeah, I used to go to the Rothko room when it was in Tate Modern.
Yeah.
Go there on a Friday evening after work when I was working in London at the time, and at one point I did an essay about it, comparing Rothko to a Dutch painter whose name I can't pronounce very well, called Sain Redan, whose paintings are in the National Gallery, paintings of churches. And there seemed to be a sort of similarity or relationship between them, the sort of soft shift of tones. So like, I know a lot of people don't like him because my students have told me, you know, when I'm praising Rothko, that some of them are just mystified by him, which is fair enough. You know, maybe it sounds a bit pretentious when I'm going on about Rothko, you know, Mark Rothko, and how I like him. But it's like, I feel he's quite different from the other abstract expressions, not to do service, because I like some of them, like Helen Frankenthaler and Joan Mitchell, but I feel like he's in a different class, something to do with, you know, they seem very sensitive to me, the way that they, you know, the paint is put down. I can't quite explain it. I feel like he's such a sort of sensitive. No, I've heard that he was difficult, which I can believe, but they seem very warm, don't they? And kind of inviting. Lozenges, floating lozenges. So you kind of have to be there, don't you, in the room?
Definitely. Yeah, I remember going to that room quite a lot when I lived in London as well, and it really did feel different. You know, it's this sort of you enter it, and it had an aura about it, a semi sort of spiritual or religious type feeling to it. I think for me, Rothko, and is still, a massive influence, and out of all of the abstract expressionists, for me, he kind of touched on these ideas of the sublime. So there's an element in it of awe and kind of history and this depth, but there's also this transcendent quality in it, and through the colours in particular. And like you say, those sort of lozenges floating in space, where you're getting a sense of perspective that is very different to a lot of senses of perspective. And it's the surface, so it's this surface depth looking into it. Hans Hofmann, the abstract painter, sort of talked about this push-pull idea, but Rothko's, not only that, they're floating kind of in an atmosphere as well. And they've got this real depth and resonance to them. And some paintings are almost quite melancholic and tragic, but other ones really kind of hum and vibrate with this joy. And I think it might sort of symbolize in many ways his character. I always just picture him sitting in a chair like I'm sitting here. There's photographs of him in front of his canvases in the evenings for hours, either in deep depression or contemplation. Rothko is great. And it's interesting you say that about, a lot of your students not quite getting it or not understanding it. But I think Rothko is, for me, is one of those artists, and there's often, a couple from each, say, movement throughout the 20th century beyond, that can kind of speak across the different genres of painting. And I think out of abstract expressionism, me, Rothko was the one who you could potentially put his work next to something from the Renaissance even, and they kind of speak to each other.
So the colours do kind of vibrate against each other, like you say.
Yeah.
And I was looking at, the Piero della Francesca Baptism of Christ in the National Gallery, and at the landscape behind John the Baptist and Jesus, and the colours of the landscape do seem to push against each other in the way that Rothko's paintings sometimes seem to work in that way as well, pushing and pulling, vibrating against each other.
Interesting. So there is in your still life paintings an element of, as I was describing there, this sense of perspective, which is surface perspective, the push and pull, how colours are next to each other, regards to, say, classical perspective in that sense. Do you feel some of that Rothko or Hans Hofmann kind of influence coming in to your work?
So that's a nice question. So every so often I think, what is my intention? Like I do sort of follow from one painting to the other, and they each throw up problems, which makes me think about, the next painting. But overall, I feel like I want the paintings to be quite sort of simple, almost like, when you see a sentence, you read the shape of it rather than the individual letters. So I want it to sort of almost like speak quite clearly. Maybe like, a good painting will communicate the color shapes quite clearly, but maybe quite softly. I'm I'm not sure that I would want them to shout, but be quite clear maybe. I'm not keen on the expressive brushwork type stuff at the moment. I feel like that's okay, but try not to overdo it myself. Yeah.
Are you using a palette knife?
Yeah, that's also a good question. I have started to use the palette knife, partly because of the demonstrations to the students, trying to get them to kind of be more bold with the colour and think about the colour. Using a big brush or a big palette knife sort of forces me to think more about the colour. I'm not a big fan of detail, but also a friend of mine who's a very good painter, David E. Luff at Winchester, once said to me, there's a problem with your paintings. You're painting quite thinly. You need to put more paint on. And that was quite good. That was very good advice. Excellent advice. Yeah.
So they're very physical paintings, and it feels almost, some of the forms, they've got a sculptural quality, but the impasto is very, very juicy, for lack of a better term. And I really like that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I like your work too, Richard.
Oh, thank you, Michael. Simon, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, well, speaking of thicker layers, I've noticed that you have a technique. I don't know if it is a technique, it seems to be a consistency where with some of your still life paintings, there are thinner layers, and then on top you'll have this textured layer of a similar color on, say, the lemons of a still life bowl of fruit. Is that something you've developed over time, or is that something which has always been a process that you'd utilize?
So I tended to use very thin paint in the past, and the color wasn't working very well. It was kind of overall grey. And the paint would sink into the canvas. So I like paintings to be sort of thick and thin paint, and also no paint, so that if the canvas is covered in a sort of thin terpsy grey wash, you'll have canvas and thin paint and thick paint next to each other. So hopefully people looking at it can enjoy the paint being kind of thin and thick and sort of enjoyable as paint. Enjoy the surface, not trying to disguise the fact that it's a painting. So enjoying the materials. It's not so much like a modernist kind of thing. The medium and everything, the surface and the paint. It's just, I like paintings like that show off the paint a bit, show off the surface. Like Bonnard's paintings are quite sort of splodgy, and the paint seems to have been dragged or smudged or smeared, almost in a childish kind of way. Sort of a primitive, almost primitive, but with strong drawing, beautiful use of colour in Bonnard. So enjoy the painting as paint. That's the thinking behind it anyway.
And you mentioned earlier about not being so concerned with temperature of the color. Are you more interested in the tonal range, or is that more what you work towards? Yeah.
So I do like tonal painters. I'm not naturally in tune with tone, so I have to use a few things to help me with that. Like Cézanne, I go on a bit about this to my students, but Cézanne used to put a black bowler hat and a white handkerchief next to his still lifes to help him navigate the tones. And I use stuff like that, like my black mobile phone or a white piece of paper. But I just can't get on with warm and cold. It just doesn't work for me. So I think of things in terms of how light is it, how dark is it? You know, what is the lightest light? What is the darkest dark? And then how red or yellow or blue is it? That seems to be more helpful to me. So I respect people that use warm and cold, but yeah, I just don't get it. This is what works for me.
Yeah. That's really interesting, because, and I think with the limited color palette as well, that sort of just the red. What was the red you used again, Michael? Did you say?
So I used to use alizarin, but alizarin crimson, but rose madder is much nicer.
Yeah. So I use rose madder a lot, actually. It's just by the De La Rowney Georgian ones, and I started using it for teaching, and it's a beautiful, beautiful colour. But I think so you've got lemon yellow, rose madder, and ultramarine blue. Did you say
Cobalt blue?
Cobalt
blue,
yeah.
Which is cheaper than cobalt blue. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Compared to the stuff the old artists used, you know, the materials we have now are amazing.
Absolutely. Because, like, just to go back, color temperature. So all of those primaries would be sort of classed as cool in a way, and often you see artists working with say split primary, where what they would then have is, you know, to counteract the cool of the rose madder or alizarin crimson, say cadmium red light, and then to counteract the cool of the lemon yellow, it would be cadmium yellow deep or something like that. And to counteract then the seeming, you know, coolness of cobalt in that sense would be, say, an ultramarine blue. Now, that's debatable, but it takes it into this whole new kind of sphere where I think, you know, tone in many ways is much more important.
It seems easier to work with to me.
Yeah.
I know, you know, I really respect, you know, artists who pre-mix their colors and, you know, use a wider range of colors because they really want to get, you know, those colors that they see. But I just find it much more straightforward to work in a very sort of limited color range. So I guess I can, you know, work more simply because, you know, painting is very challenging. Yeah, and I guess this is what helps me. I used to try, you know, using all these different colors, but I did find it quite annoying. I used to go out into the landscape and try and find a blue, you know, a yellow and ultramarine, and, you know, try to get the greens to work, and it was just impossible. Then when I found with the cobalt blue and the lemon yellow, I found that I could make quite a nice green, and my pain seemed to subside.
And isn't it interesting, sort of the more simple the tools we have in that sense, if we limit ourselves, the more comfortable, I find it more comfortable anyway. You know, I normally just use one brush and one palette knife and my 3 colours plus white. And I've got to know that palette knife so well, that shape, it's my shape. I know, you know, this angle, that angle, the brush and the colours as well. And within that, I'm kind of sort of king of that little domain there. I know it so well. As soon as you start spreading out and having so much more to think about, some of the artists we've talked to have 10 plus colours out. You know, that's too crazy. It's too much. Michael, do you still paint? Because some of the first paintings I saw of yours were landscapes. Do you still paint the landscape?
A bit. So I did used to be more of a landscape painter. I lived in Winchester, and the studio that I shared was quite near St Catherine's Hill. So I did used to go up there with my paints. Sometimes it would rain, then it would stop. Somebody would come up to me and say, "Oh, you've just started. I'll come back when you've done a bit more." So all in all, I prefer to be in the studio. It's nice. It's nice being a landscape painter. I'll go out and paint with my painting friends sometimes, and that's always really nice. But I don't know. I suppose I feel more invested in painting a blue cup next to some apples, next to a red bottle, next to some plums or something. I suppose I want to be thinking about the colours, simple colours. You can select. I suppose you want a colour makes you want to paint it. I guess starting with a very simple colour idea and nothing too complicated. I used to paint apples on a blue background, and then the same friend said, I'm making him sound terrible now, but he's a really good painter. He said, your paintings are sort of a bit like red, yellow, and blue, but actually nature tends towards grey and brown. So that was very good advice. Yeah,
that's like a good friend to have. Reality check every now and then.
You have your painting friends that you talk to about your painting.
Yeah, I don't so much. Sometimes, but I tend to use this podcast for that. It's but I think it's so helpful. And I'm actually moving soon to an area where there's more artists. I currently live in a part of Norfolk, but there's not many artists. There's a few, and I teach here as well. But I'm moving soon to an area of Norfolk where there's a high concentration of artists, and I'm looking forward to sort of hanging out more with painters and having that discourse around it, because I think, in a way, we can get blinkers on with our own work and sort of not see it. And if it's selling and getting likes on Instagram, you think, well, everything's fine. Things are going, according to plan. But it's often a painter that steps in and says they see something in it that you don't, or other people don't. It's very important. Do you have painter friends around you?
One or two. I moved to Dorset a year ago, so I'll go out and paint with them, and we'll be in a field painting alongside each other. It's nice.
Yeah.
Somebody will say, "Oh, I like that," or are you going to finish that?
Yeah, it's interesting. So how do you deal with public? Because we talk about vista plein air painters a lot. They said one of the major problems, there's worse problems to have, is painting outside and members of the public come in and take in interest in what you're doing. How do you deal with it? Are you polite? Do you ignore them? What do you do?
Well, people where I am are really polite and nice, so it's not so terrible. I don't know what it is, but when I was in Hampshire, it was more testing. Somebody somebody came up to me with a camera once. They were, you know, an artist, and they were like doing some sort of diary of people's occupations, and you know, they asked if they could take photographs of me painting, and I said sure. And then the next thing I know, you know, there's this kind of clicking noise, you know, clicking away during my lovely peaceful, you know, painting day, and yeah, I was like, sorry, do you mind not doing that? Do you mind stopping? And she was like, oh, sorry, is it annoying? And I was like, yeah, it's
We're going to give Hampshire a bad name. It was Sarah Manoliscu, I believe, was in Hampshire, who the woman picked up a paintbrush and started to try and paint herself on Sarah's painting, and she just said no and took the brush off her. It's taking liberties, I think.
Yeah. Sarah's very polite, so yeah, I can imagine. I can just imagine. Yeah, you know, I've got friends in Hampshire. I don't mean to give Hampshire a bad name.
So, why did you probably moved for various reasons? But did you move to the coast? Are you by the coast? Did you move for the light? What was your thinking? Was it an artistic move?
So I come from Bournemouth originally, and it's really pretty here. The harbour, the seaside, the beach is beautiful. The houses got a lot of character. Yeah, so I like it here. It's a good, you know, it's a good place to be.
Has it influenced your work at all, the move?
Very difficult to say at the moment. You know how involved you are in your own painting, and it's difficult to be detached. I think maybe the colours have got stronger. I mean, I think you look at your work, you did it a year ago, and think that was terrible. I was terrible, and now I'm not quite so bad. You know, you feel like you're getting simultaneously better and worse.
Yeah, that's part of the thing, isn't it? I was saying this to some students this morning, that you just raise the bar on yourself all of the time. You know, your kind of perspective of your own work, and I say to them, okay, now look back to a year ago and see the work from a year ago. And they look and they think, oh God, that's awful. So, well, now look what you're producing, even though it looks bad to you, you're just raising the bar on your own sort of achievements each time. I think it's interesting with the move. I mean, when I left London and moved back to the countryside, my work changed a lot, because I suddenly had the light all around me. It was a different feel to it. Whereas before in London, sort of looking for moments of light where I could see them in between buildings. So there was this sense of longing a lot in my work, which thankfully is sort of carried over here. But I'm always interested by artists when they move. And of course, you know, art history is full of artists moving around. And you often see that shift in their work as well. You know, from just thinking about Ben Nicholson and all of the people that left London to go down to Cornwall. You know, it's an amazing sort of migration, and thankfully we get to see the visual sort of fruit of those little migrations.
I like the St Ives artist very much. Yeah, I used to like Ben Nicholson's, the way that he combined colour and line. Should I put the light on, do you think? It's getting a bit dark in here. So that might seem a bit poor.
There we go. Full colour now.
Bit much.
Yeah, it's interesting how Cornwall is always known for that, especially down in St Ives, that sort of silver light. and you see then how it comes into artists' work. You know, different lights, different temperature, different places. It's fascinating.
So at the moment, I've got this shed at the bottom of the garden, and maybe it's a bit dark. So perhaps initially my work was a bit dark when I moved down here. I didn't realise until somebody was looking at it and saying, "Oh, you know, I really like your new light work." And I sort of thought to myself, well, actually, I think I actually said, well, actually, that's my new dark work.
Yeah.
I actually realised until it was pointed out that the new work was dark. So that, you know, that was quite useful. Yeah, I look at the. Sorry, go on.
No, please.
So I look at, when I went down to St Ives, the colours seemed quite different. I painted a few paintings and I struggled to get some of those colours, you know, the green sea and the, you know, what were the colours of the clouds. I was, you know, bus shelter, looking at the clouds, thinking, I don't know what colour the clouds are. So, you know, working at that. And the way I think about it is that it takes quite a while to get used to a new studio space in the same way. Like, what is the colour behind the still lifes? What is the colour of the table? What is the colour of that yellow wall? You know, you look at it, but you can't see it. You have to look at the colour, you know, that is nearby that's a bit like that colour, and look at them both at the same time. If you're me, that is. Maybe a lot of painters just can see it immediately, but I am unfortunately not one of those. So one of my teaching ideas is to sort of help students around that sort of identifying, you know, the colour by looking at two colours at the same time. I find that quite good.
That's interesting. So so say if you've got a red item and another red item, is that what you mean? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's interesting. So you're so much about it's about training your eyes. So,
I mean, I can get lost in the painting and it can fall, you know, it can go really badly. So making annoying mistakes sort of forces me to do something about it, you know, by using kind of tools like that. I get annoyed enough about it by the dismal realization that a painting has gone badly wrong that I decide eventually to do something about it. Yeah, that's the idea anyway.
That's interesting. And I think with colour as well, it's one of those things, like for me, looking at skies, the more you look at it, the more, not so much you understand it, the more you realise it's sort of the possibilities or the understanding of it is endless. But you can kind of tune your mind or your eyes into recognising these things, little nuances or subtleties between colours. Howard Hodgkin. So Howard Hodgkin, there's a great, I think it's still on YouTube, where he goes to India with Alan Yentop. Is it Alan Yentop he goes with? And he's talking about when they go to this shop somewhere and there's a black handkerchief in the window, and Howard Hodgkin goes in and sort of says, "I'd like that black handkerchief in the window." So the shop assistant or owner goes and gets a black handkerchief out of the back. He said, "No, that's not the same black as the black handkerchief in the window." So he gets another. He say, "No, it's not." He said, "Get the one from the window," and you could see it's a very subtle difference. But Howard Hodgkin, great colorist, he knew, he understood just that that nuance, that little difference.
Yeah, he enjoys colour, he enjoys paint. He's unusual amongst, well, English painters in the past. You know, like, it's always been, you know, French painters, Italian painters, American painters that seem to sort of enjoy the paint more to me. But he is kind of rarity. He did say, you know, in the interview with him, I think Alan Yentop said, "Are there any other painters besides, you know, that you rate at the moment?" He just went, "No."
Yeah, yeah. He hung about with poets and writers more. I think that was Howard Hodgkins, you know, main thing. Great painter though. You know, just its sort of simplicity, but I mean, far from it. And especially his later work, just a few brushstrokes, absolute genius.
Michael, do you exhibit your work in galleries? And if so, what are the galleries where you exhibit?
Thanks for asking that. Yeah, I show with Grandy Art, and they're going to show some of my work with their other artists at the Affordable Art Fair in Battersea. So I've just got the date here. It's from the 6th to the 10th of March in Battersea, stand L6, if you want to go and see it.
Fantastic.
Thanks for asking.
And do you know what you're exhibiting yet?
I kind of leave it to them to decide. Sometimes I think artists are a terrible judge of their own work. So I'm one of those.
Well, aside from the this exhibition, where would you like our viewers or listeners to go online to support your work and to see your work?
Well, thanks. If you'd like to have a look at grandyart.com, they've got a lot of my work, and they're good. I like Grandy Art. And maybe have a look at Winslow Art Centre. I'm doing a class with them at the beginning from 11th of April, and it's called Divine Fruit, which I thought was which a friend advised me to use, and I thought it was a catchy title. So yeah, Divine Fruit.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I'll put links in the description of this video. But do you have a website? Yeah, you do. You have a website as well, by the looks of it here as well, yeah?
Yeah, they can contact me on the website or follow me on Instagram if they'd like to.
Fantastic. Then there'll be links in the description for those exhibitions and for the website and for your Instagram. But yeah, thank you very much for being a guest on the podcast. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.
So I'll talk to you both. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Really, really interesting and important insights into your practice. Thank you.
Thanks.
We hope you enjoyed that episode. If you can support the podcast by leaving a like or a comment down below, that would really be great. But what we'd really like is if you're able to leave a review on the podcast channels, wherever you listen to it or download it, because that helps us get spread around the internet so that more people have access to us and able to see what we're making.
Also, follow us on Instagram, and we'd really appreciate it if you like and engage with our posts. Help get the podcast better known. Thanks for listening.